Okay, everybody. With the 19th overall pick in the 2024 draft, the Raptors select Jacoby Walter. Now, this is a player that Trey and I talked a little bit about. We're going to talk more about, obviously. Kind of a funny tidbit. I didn't go to OVO Center to talk about the Raptors selection with, I guess, like Bobby Webster, etc., because I was at the Raptors Republic draft party. Thank you to everybody for coming out. But an interesting tidbit from that little meetup with Bobby Webster, he said they've been tracking Jacoby Walter since his senior year of high school, or at the end of it, which means they've been paying attention to him for a year. For those of you, that's not very long. We talk to Josh Codenare all the time, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've been watching this guy since grade 10." So they're relatively new to Jacoby Walter. They probably really loved his opening game, like that was it 26 or 28 point performance. He is kind of electric as far as like getting to his own shot. The upside is as a shot maker. To my mind, the hope is that he can translate some of his athleticism to being kind of punchy on ball defensively, although that we're not seeing that much of that. And the big takeaway is that this is a guy who takes a wide variety of shots. This is a guy who gets 2 feet in the paint. And to this point, this is a guy who has not been super successful at converting once he's there. Trevon, you tweeted that you thought they got lottery value at number 19. Wax poetic, please, sir.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of, like we talked about in our pocket, one of the highest outcomes you would expect at 19. With Jacoby, you're putting yourself in a situation where you probably have someone that adds some connectivity to the both IQ and Grady, because he has the physical tools to eventually become a good defender. But the percentages don't show the level of shooter that he was at Baylor. He was, some of it to his own fault, but shooting at such a high difficulty from three at so many angles off of tons of movements, with a lot of that probably being simplified within the NBA because he won't have the same sort of burden. He's going to be able to create a lot of havoc for what the Raptors are looking for. And I think the pick just in general just gives you an idea of what they believe the best type of players around Scotty Barnes is. They've sort of drafted 2 players in a row that both are primarily off-ball players that help probably accentuate a lot of his passing and are also going to open up the floor with him. I think with Jacoby, there is more upside than I think people are letting on, especially as a pull-up shooter. You saw a lot more of it in high school. And if that translates into the NBA with more space and him being able to create with separation as he gets stronger, the Raptors are put themselves in a situation where you possibly aren't let me not say regret, bad trade. Let me not that's optimistic. But you're putting yourself in a situation where you're not that upset that you lost your pick this year. You came away with a great talent that was mock top 5 in the beginning of the season.
So this is a win for people who wanted the pick to convey, you think?
Huge win.
So Dre comments here, says, "Am I crazy for thinking Jacoby's handle is underrated? It looks a lot better than a lot of these off-ball shooter types." In watching, because I watched 3 games of Jacoby, in his highlights, it looks pretty good. Like you can see left-handed drives to the rim. As far as during the course of games, you don't see a lot of like handle stuff from Jacoby. However, I do think that the pull-up is kind of what allows for the upside there. And the pull-up stuff is pretty clunky right now. But if you're looking for anything to validate a guy who will shoot at the next level, it's not like 3 attempts per game, 40% at college level. It's a guy who, like Jacoby, shot 37% from the NBA distance threes when he was playing in the college dimensions, right? It's a guy who is consistently moving into his jumper and doesn't allow defense to allow him to squash his volume there, right? We're talking about a guy who's going to willingly put up difficult shots, a guy who's willingly going to put up really difficult shots, and a guy who's going to shoot against like a lot of different coverages, a guy who's going to shoot at a lot of different types of movement. This is something I covered with Grady Dick in that big piece I wrote about him, looking at movement shooting to try and determine who has real upside as a shooter. Jacoby is a guy who merits that type of extra look as well. You see like Baylor use him out of a lot of sets for their ATOs, sprinting into the ball to rise up, get shots in a pinch. As you say, building around Scotty, I think there's a lot of sense in picking a guy like Jacoby, who not only can you see like a smidgen of that identification for when to cut, how to fill space and play next to a guy like that, but somebody who can space, as you said, for Scotty Barnes. And it's nice to see Scotty, he signed that massive contract. It's nice to see them building with him in mind. I think the team building had gone awry for some years over the past handful. You want to have that top-down connectivity from the guy who's making the decisions to the players who are kind of acting out the scheme and the vision for the team, and that's built around Scotty Barnes. Of course, it can change depending on how things trend, but I like it there. Can we talk a little bit about defense? I kind of want to get your thoughts.
Everything that's been said about his defense is right now theoretical.
Yeah,
he measured extremely well at the combine. I think he was around 6'4.5" without shoes, so that's 6'6", +6 wingspan.
I think he's 6'10" wingspan.
6'10", yeah,
6'10",
yeah. And his agility score were really good as well. I think some of that shows on tape in terms of being able to get to the spot. And I think you mentioned this in the last podcast. He just doesn't have the necessary strength where him sliding and getting in the way is impeding his defender. He's getting bumped off his spot a lot. And it showed in ways, even offensively, in him trying to create separation. I think defensively that length will come into play as he gets a lot stronger. And if he is able to maintain that same sliding ability, I think that bodes well into becoming a good on-ball defender like in the future. Because what I saw at Baylor was effort, and that's probably I think the effort and tools are the hardest things to teach.
Yeah.
So I think that will come along as he develops and gets a lot bigger, and he's one of the younger prospects in the draft, so that will happen over time.
It's a big deal when players give a shit, obviously. Khalil Ware goes from maybe like a guaranteed top 8 pick to maybe 15 heading into the militant stands of the, under Mickey Harrison. I do think it is interesting to think about I guess there's new people listening. So to rehash a little bit of the conversation we had, when you look at Jacoby move his feet and slide defensively, a lot of times he's meeting guys there. He's quick enough. He recognizes where he's supposed to be defensively. He's quite slight still. He's one of the younger players in the draft. And if you've played basketball, listener, viewer, when you meet somebody and there's somebody who's stronger than you, meeting them isn't all that's required to win the defensive possession. They can grind you towards the basket, and you might not accomplish that. And that works on the opposite end. When we talked about Devin Carter as a prospect that we liked, it's because Devin Carter is a guy who will take that dribble, have a guy meet him where it's a good defensive spot, but can still grind and step his way to the rim. I saw somebody asked what the comparison is between Jacoby and Grady. Jacoby was really, really bad at the rim, had very little touch there. Grady was really accomplished at the rim. Grady was, as Bobby Webster said after Grady got drafted, he identified him as a uniquely gifted off-ball player, and that's something that I agree with. On top of that, he's got tremendous touch, and he was a much better shooter at the NBA level. However, Grady doesn't have the feet that Jacoby has, and as we know, athleticism can manifest in many different ways, and skills are easier to develop at the NBA level. Do I think Jacoby will be better than Grady? Probably not. But the fact that you can even talk about them in comparison, I suppose, is like a nice and good thing. Joining us, my fellow Saskatchewanite, is that what we're called, Cody?
You can call us whatever, man. I mean, it's Saskatchewanian I like to go by. So there's that one there too.
Well, give us your thoughts on Jacoby. I kind of want to hear what you think.
I like it, guys. I know we were talking a little bit about it at the draft party. I know Trey threw out the Kentavious Caldwell-Pope comparison. I think that's interesting. You guys were touching on the defense just now. Not sure he gets to what ACP's level is for sure. I mean, but that 6'10" wingspan that's something the Raptors covet, right? So I think it's a good fit. I think you guys were touching on like him, IQ, and Grady being able to space around Scotty is something that is super interesting. So we'll see. This raises questions about Gary Trent Jr. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later, but I like the fit for Walter, regardless if GTJ is there or not.
I guess let's keep it with Walter strictly just a little bit longer. I guess we can read out the stat line for people who are interested in that type of thing. So Jacoby Walter, 35 minutes or 35 games, 32 minutes per game, 37% from the field. I think he was sub 50% at the rim, which obviously isn't great. He was 34% from three, 79% from the line, 1.4 assists. Trey and I talked about this on the podcast almost a month ago. You're looking for more of that playmaking that hasn't manifested necessarily. 14.5 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 1 steal. He's quick. He gets to spots, 54% true shooting. Young player in the draft, true freshman. There's a lot of older players getting selected around where the Raptors were picking him. And now we can talk about it. The Gary Trent Jr. of it all. Grady Dick is there. Gary Trent Jr. is there. Emmanuel Quickley is there. RJ Barrett is there. I wrote an article about this at the end of March, I believe, where it was like, it seems to be where it looks as if Gary Trent Jr.'s time in Toronto is kind of going towards like it might be ending, depending on how the contract works out, of course. But Gary Trent, because of what type of team the Raptors want to facilitate, you see how Jacoby in Baylor could work out of dribble handoffs. You see how Grady can work out of dribble handoffs and some of those, I guess, triangle concepts that the Raptors like to run. They're younger. They seem to play within the concept a little bit more and conceivably have higher potential than Gary. Gary's had a lot of games as Raptor, seen a lot of the ball, has had an earnest attempt to try and make the most of him that he can. Trey, what do you make of it? Does this say anything about how the Raptors build the team going forward?
Yeah, I think what they're looking for is great decision makers and obviously people that can pass, shoot, and drive. Like with the comments, obviously Jacoby's finishing at the rim, not very good. But what makes him different from like a Gary Trent Jr. who struggles is that Gary struggled getting to that actual point. So that leads to more upside. Like Jacoby's free throw rate was really good because he has the athleticism to actually get to those spots.
An elite free throw rate, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good because he's an athletic player and he works really well for dribble handoffs, just like a KCP, for example. I think the Raptors are probably viewing Scotty as a hub, and if you offer dangerous pieces that create chaos throughout the perimeter, we've already seen with his touch and his ability to separate with strength, those one-on-one matchups, he will likely win majority of his those matchups. And if you're giving him requisite spacing and guys who can continue advantages, you're putting yourself in a situation where you're like the Kings or like Denver to other degrees, where you can run multiple actions across multiple sides, and it makes it extremely difficult to guard the other team's best player.
I think I'll also add, since I see people in chat bringing up Ochai, we're talking about Gary not necessarily just because of the overlap in skill or perceived overlap in skill, but because Gary's a free agent. Ochai is under the term is team control, right, with his contract situation. Now, I'm not very high on Ochai because he plays like a guy who should be 6'8", and he hasn't shot the ball well at the NBA level. But Ochai, he and Kelly came over for a first-round pick. They're going to give him an honest look. And Ochai has been able to defend at the point of attack. I've been critical of him, but credit to him for being pretty sticky at the point of attack. Cody, a little bit more, because you brought it up. What is the Gary Trent Jr. Jacoby of it all to you?
It's interesting. He's a player that fits, so you can't necessarily say it's a signal that Gary's leaving. But Walter does fit like kind of what Darko wants. Like, I think you could argue that Gary Trent Jr. is a bit more like ISO heavy kind of self-creation rather than fitting into what Darko's 0.5 system is going to be. So maybe there was always, what happened to was it Chris Haynes who said that there was a Gary Trent Jr. extension? What happened to that? Yeah. Has that ever happened where there's a report and you just hear nothing about it? So that's also, it's been weird since then with him. Like, I'm not sure what's going on there, but
if I can just like, basically, as far as I understand, sometimes, there are automatic texts that go out or people communicate in such a way with front offices or people in front offices. And sometimes to be first, you want to be really quick. And if somebody sends you the wrong info or is like giving you contextual info and they misspell something or leave something out and you just quickly like report that, it might put you in a really odd spot. That happens all the time when people are trying to beat things to the punch. I don't know, or maybe he just got something really bad. I'm not sure. You get whispers and stuff all the time, but Yeah, if you don't have time to vet them, i.e. Shams tweeting out that Dame was a Raptor, Jake Fisher tweeting out that Jared McCain was going to the Heat, right? Like, we see guys get it wrong all the time. When you have time to vet that stuff, which is why the Haynes thing is really odd, because it's like, who was waiting on their, like, oh, are they going to extend Gary Trent Jr.? I don't know. But yeah, anyway, regardless, go ahead.
Yeah, like, so it's like, I wonder how much money he's going to command. I wonder how long Toronto would want to lock him up if we were to play out that he would come back. Like, is he getting over 20 million? Probably. No. You don't think
Malik, here's okay. So I tweeted about this. So I believe, if I still have the numbers here. So
Malik took a bit of a pay cut, though. Like, Malik Monk was worth more than what he got paid.
Certainly, but even if that's the case, he still sets the market. So when Gary signed his contract, the 3 years with the player option, Gary, coming off of what was not a great, like, he played a handful of games with the Raptors, and it was like, okay.
Yeah.
Gary made 15.8% of the cap, 15.7% of the cap, and then 15.1% of the cap as a Raptor. Malik is making under 15% of the cap, and he's significantly better than Gary. Significantly. It's hard to imagine a world where Gary's market exists far above the mid-level exception.
Yeah.
Like, just looking at how it's shaping up, getting over 15 million, I think his agent would be like, we killed this man. You know what I mean? Like, we rocked it. I don't know, Trey, do you have thoughts on Gary?
Yeah, I think in terms of, like, as a Raptors, probably best that they move on. With him, like, contract value wise, I don't think he's. Emily is probably the most I'd probably be willing to pay him, especially on a short term deal, just simply because the way that the Raptors want to play is they want their role players to be able to take the ball and make decisions and not just be a play finisher, which is like the inverse of what Nick Nurse was, where you had these big isolation hubs, or really one, and you had play finishers all around them. I think Gary's probably best course of action is probably a short-term deal next to like Philadelphia makes a lot of sense. He would be great in Philly. He just has to stand in the corner, play off Joel Embiid, and he can hit tons of corner threes.
So I would say, just as a quick thing, there's actually Gary and Jacoby represent a complete departure in style. As you mentioned, Gary, a guy who's really good at, like, forming up to a drive, making himself available, and played his best basketball next to a high isolation level of basketball, where he got the spot up as Fred and Pascal both were, for a time, top 10 in the NBA in getting doubled frequency. And when he'd get the ball, grenades at the end of the clock, he could kind of get into his workout ball bag and try and create shots. And he got a lot of shots relative to his talent. Jacoby is a guy who is really good attacking tilted defenses. Jacoby is a guy who's really jittery, getting to movement threes, not just being like a spot up guy waiting for, okay, the defense collapsed, the ball comes to me. It's like an inverse style of attack. So Jacoby is a guy who you expect to be able to drive into the lane against closeouts and out of those triangle concepts that they run, a lot of the post hub stuff that they love to run, a guy who can attack and manipulate when Scotty has bent the floor, and a guy who, in those dribble handoffs or Chicago actions that the Raptors are running a ton of, or even some of their inverted horn stuff, can go and get the ball above the break and launch threes. And the hope is that 37% that he shot at the NBA 3-point line in college is something that translates immediately. The expectation shouldn't be that Jacoby is a guy who changes the fortune of the Raptors this season. The expectation should be that Jacoby could be a very good player next to Scotty season 3, season 4, season 5, season 6, season 7. Any other Jacoby thoughts before we talk a smidgen about the second round where the Raptors have the world at heel? Anybody have Jacoby thoughts before we do a bit of chatting?
I think probably just a swing skill for him is going to be whether he is able to probably stop within the mid range and actually change in the amount of ways that he attacks, like whether that's a floater, whether that's utilizing his playmaking from there. While he was really good at attacking closeouts, he pretty much was an all or nothing player heading at the rim, and that was a big reason why he struggled there. I was really high on him because I saw a player like Trent Jr, for example, with added time, added reps, get better at those things. Gary got better at the rim slightly by adding those things, and he's a much more athletic player. So I think that it bodes really well, and with a much easier role and with a great passing hub like Scotty, I think the Raptors smashed this pick.
I'll let you close this out, Cody, but I'll just hammer this home, kind of to your point, Trey. The fact that Jacoby is so good after in movement, after receiving on the catch to get the ball up, that's a really good indicator, because he hasn't been so good on the pull-up because he's been kind of truncated and a little bit clunky getting the ball up to where he likes to catch it. That shouldn't be too much work to help manipulate with his dribble and how he sets throw ahead dribbles or pound dribbles into space to just work on where he's collecting the basketball. And he should be able to kind of mimic some of the movements that allowed for him to be such a strong movement shooter, just using it to set up his dribble. By the way, there's almost 400 people watching live right now. Like the video, and it'll help spread it out to other people by the time we're finished. Cody, the last thoughts on Jacoby.
Not to gas you up too much, Trey, in front of the 400 people watching, but I think it's super smart that you brought up the in-between game and kind of finishing at the rim. I think that's a big indicator of where Jacoby Walter's offensive potential lies. Selfishly, because I cover the 905, I would love for him to get a ton of reps down there and really improve, like you said, improve on that more primary initiator. You know, he showed some playmaking and stuff, self-creation like that in high school. So I'd love for him to get some reps down there in the G League and just see what he can do. I think he's going to get a lot of reps in Summer League doing that as well. But yeah, I like the pick. I like the tools he has. He's an awesome shooter. So like the fit. I'm happy with it. Is Masai back? Is Masai back? I don't know.
That's funny.
No,
I do. Go ahead.
2 years in a row where like a guy fell to them that they probably didn't expect. Like Jacoby Walter didn't work out for them at all. He didn't probably expect there to be a 19, and nor did the Raptors. So although we had bad luck in the lottery, it seems like the picks keep falling our way.
It's not been bad. You know, as I said at the top, Cody, you weren't here for this, but it's if you really do like Jacoby, then it is kind of like a vote of confidence for like, well, glad the pick conveyed. Because if the Raptors are going to be bad next year, Jacoby is not going to be the player who changes those fortunes. And if the Raptors are very good next year, it will presumably be because Scotty Barnes is tremendous, and Jacoby seems like a vote of confidence for building around Barnes. So either you get a really good swing in 2025 in what people deem a very sexy draft class, as everyone kind of like lamented. Even Masai was like, this draft class is not good. I'm not excited. I'm trading out of this. All very interesting, all very funny. But I am interested. If you think Jacoby can shoot it, you should feel pretty good about this pick. If you think that his added strength over time, the NBA like regimen, whatever the weight program they put Grady on, if you think that all that stuff is going to come into play, it's pretty easy to see Jacoby being a guy who fits on an NBA roster for a long time. And to your thoughts about working in the mid-range and to Cody's idea of self-creation that he saw at the high school level, if that manifests as well, then it's really easy to see the upside of the pick and like the true upside of the pick. Jonathan Mogbo is still available. I talked about Jonathan Mogbo. We talked about Jonathan Mogbo. He's pretty interesting in chat. Since there is like 420 people in here, we should get lots of responses. Say who you would like, and we can talk about a couple of them. But Trey, who's on the top of your board for 31 right now?
The way I view I view this draft the entire time is let's just get some contributors and just add to the talent pool. So for me, it'd probably be Kyle Filipowski. I think the Raptors have addressed getting another wing, although you probably want some size. There's guys like probably like a Ryan Dunn or Kevin McCullough. But I think with Filipowski, I'd be fairly confident that he could be your backup big for a long period of time. And he fits what the Raptors want from that particular position, where they want bigs that are going to be able to make decisions, that can put the ball on the floor, ideally space and pass as well. And Filipowski is probably someone that he had probably no idea that he was going to be here at 31. I'm pretty surprised that he's here as well. There's some athletic concern, But if you're pegging him as your backup big, you're getting a lot of value for him at 31.
Just to stick here, Trey, you like a lot of the guys we scouted early were based on your preference. AJ Mitchell is still there. Does the Jacoby selection make you think like, the development might be a little bit too clunky with the Raptors backcourt currently, or is he still somebody you'd be like, yeah, sure, let's go for it?
I don't think we're in a position to turn down anything. Developing two guards at once is probably tough. I just fairly confident that Filipowski is going to be a hit, and if you can get two guys that are contributors into your talent pool heading into 2025, where there's more star-laden guys, I think you're at a really good baseline.
I'm going to come off on the other side of things. I'm not big on Filipowski. So the podcast can be represented here that, like, I watched Cody play at the Raptors 3-on-3.
Oh, bad day for me.
We in Toronto, we have Kyle Filipowski at home. You know what I'm saying?
You guys are gassing me up too much.
No.
But I'm not super big on Filipowski. So one of us will be right and one of us will be wrong.
Big on me. Wait, hold up. What is that? So you don't like my skill set?
You just got compared to an NBA player, man. Like it's okay, you know. You could compare me to Ochai Agbaji, and I'll be like, he has nice abs, like something like that. You got to take the wins where you can get them. But who do you like at 31?
Just for the sake of talking about somebody different, I do like Kyle Filipowski. I was telling this to Trey at the party. I don't know. I wonder what the result, what people think about this. Tyler Smith. He's a name that I really like for them at 31. He's a bit limited. Yes, he mainly just shoots threes, and that's kind of the skill that he has, but there is some even concerns there. I like his game as a fit next to Scotty. I think those flashes of weak side rim protection. He can operate in pick and roll. I think he is a better screener than people give him credit for. He has a little bit of verticality to where he can go up and catch some lobs. And if you think that the shooting's also pretty good, there's some potential, PNR mismatch going on there. Overall, I like him as somebody who can space the floor, and there's concerns like this limited self-creation is something that scares me a little bit with him. But in the second round, like I think he's a really good role player in today's NBA.
And a role player 31 is a big win. Luca's asking why I'm down on KP. I talked about this more at length with Brendan, but I don't see a big win for his skill set just yet. And of course, there are swing skills that could emerge for him at the NBA level that make it really easy. But to me, I understand he's a popular name and he's falling. So like, I think it could be intrinsically like there's more value there or not, but I'm just not exactly sure where he finds his foothold immediately in the NBA. And it could get funky from there. That's my thoughts on Filipowski. And then also Marcel Flores brings up a cool thing. And, a unique thing is that he says, Mogbo at 31. My only problem with Walter is that he did not work out with us. So last year, I reported that Grady had gone back for a second workout with the Raptors and that he and Kobe Buffkin had both done that. However, this year, apparently, I don't know if that's 100% true. But as Trey mentioned, it is cool for the Raptors to be in position where you're looking at the draft and they're getting what they believe to be, with their scouting, surplus value at the pick. Guys they have ranked much higher. I wonder if they might have even had Jacoby in the top 10, quite honest. Somebody they have much higher falls to them and they're like, got to snap them up. Because they had to break a draft promise last year because Grady fell to them and they didn't see that happening. It should be very, very interesting. Do you guys have any expectation that the draft pick will get traded? Anything like that?
I think initially heading into it, I assumed that they were probably going to trade back, maybe collect a 2025, something like that. But there's a lot of talent there at the top. I think it's just a matter of where their guy is and whether they think they can trade back. If it's a swing, then I like say like a Cam Christie, for example, and you wanted to go back 5 or 6 spots.
I like that first name. There's a different last name you could put on the end of that one, man.
But if they want to swing for a particular guy, it makes sense to trade back, recoup 2025. If you are able to snap up another second round pick, that makes a lot of sense and tidy piece of business.
Yeah. Marcelo Flores' response says he said it in his post-game or his post-selection interview, and his call was his first time talking to Toronto. Thanks for reading. Marcelo, thank you for giving that information. This is kind of the cool thing about doing the live stream, because there's like 500 people in here, just like adding, like some Twitch streamers, they just use their chat as like Wikipedia. They're like, oh, I wonder about this. And then answers start popping up. That's fantastic. I'm going to go, I hope it's Mogbo. And I am leaning a little bit on everyone's favorite scout, Josh Codenera. He really likes Mogbo. He has a great track record as far as I know. I talked to him a lot about basketball, and I like Mogbo a lot, and I think like kind of a kick-ass player would be really good on this roster. Filipowski, yeah, lower on, but if they draft him, we can kind of get into all that. So for people who are looking for more, I guess, Jacoby Walter stuff, I believe Brendan Stewart, the resident draft writer at Raptors Republic, will have a forthcoming piece. I'm pretty sure he had Jacoby ranked 11th on his big board. So for Raptors Republic's draft writer, the Raptors got surplus value there. Of course, none of this really matters depending on how the players turn out. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, fellas?
I think the Raptors hit a home run today. I think with 31, it probably allows them to swing a bit, because I think they're going to end up probably getting a contributor. I am surprised Bruce Brown didn't get traded today.
That's funny. Our dear friend Goose, who's been on this podcast many times, he tweeted that he was happy that Bruce Brown was no longer going to be a Raptor. And Bruce Brown responded. He was like, wow, y'all really don't love me, huh? Like,
yeah, but I don't know. It seems like they're probably going to use him to facilitate like probably a 3-team deal and hopefully recoup a pick or another prospect. So I think it's fine. Bruce Brown, leave Goose alone.
Can I actually say something? So there was, when I was watching before the start of last season, and I was watching Scotty Barnes, all of his tape, just to track all of his plays and see what was happening with his game. In the pick and roll, the guy who was best at landing screens was Christian Coloco. And that was something that Scotty really appreciated. And Scotty is a player who, similar to Kyle Lowry, similar to Luka Doncic, very different players there, and Scotty is quite different than both of them. The expectation for stars and star wings, star guards, is that they can weaponize athletic bigs. They can make them like greater than the sum of their parts. And Mogbo is a big man who I think could pair quite well with Scotty, and Scotty could put him in a lot of winning positions that Mogbo could convert on. And I like Mogbo's defensive potential quite a lot. That's my pitch. And also, I would just love to see how that goes. And also, they know each other, I'm pretty sure. So that's and as Giovanni puts, like, Mogbo's a power forward. He can handle and play make some as well. It's almost a prerequisite for the Raptors to draft or sign big men who are comfortable getting the, like, from elbow to elbow or across the top of the key with a live dribble to connect some of their plays that they like to run. That's the full Mogbo pitch. Cody, is there anything you'd like to say before we get out of here?
I mean, we got to change your name to Mogbo supporter. I like Mogbo. I like Mogbo though. He basically does everything well except shoot. Like, he's a non-shooter, but
he can't shoot a lick.
Not a
there was some clips though. Cue the Twitter clips of him pre-draft workouts shooting. That's
so meaningless, man.
Like, it's like Ben Simmons every year. Like, there's a mixtape. Regardless, I wouldn't mind Mogbo. Wouldn't mind Filipowski. Wouldn't mind Smith. I wouldn't mind a bigger body instead of. I'd lean more bigger body than guard. Like, someone we haven't brought up, Tyler Kolek, was long thought to be in the first round. Not sure about that with the Raptors, but he's one of the truer point guards that that this class is producing. So I'd rather see them go bigger body, but I want them to keep the pick.
Okay, noted. Okay, Trey, before we get out of here, anything you want to say?
I agree with you, Cody. The Raptors are kind of on the perimeter. They're kind of built like Team Canada, where everyone is now 6'5" to 6'7". Strange enough, but overall, I think with the pick, I think ideally you just go best player on the board. Like, the Raptors aren't in a position to thinking about fit. the only thought process should be probably whether this guy can play with Scotty. But even at 31, you just want a contributor because that the odds of getting a contributor usually at that pick is fairly low.
Hell yeah. All right. Thank you to the almost 500 people in here. It's 12 p.m. on a Wednesday, or I guess technically Thursday. You guys are nuts. Thanks for popping in. Like and subscribe before you get out of here. And if you feel so inclined, you can subscribe over at raptorsrepublic.com. It's how you support some independent journalism in Toronto. And I guess the home of many of the biggest names in Toronto basketball media. They start out Raptors Republic, and that's how we survive, baby. All right, everybody. Thanks for popping in. Trey, Cody, thanks for joining up. And God, maybe we'll do this after round 2. I'm not sure. But we did the same thing. Trey and I were laughing like, oh, there's not why we can't do a draft party for 19, but people showed up.
Yeah.
You know, them's the breaks. Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.